Welcome, dear dreamer, to Whispers of the Night. I'm so grateful that you're here, settling into this peaceful moment just for yourself. Before we drift into tonight's gentle dreamscape, take a quiet second to relax your shoulders, soften your breath, and allow your mind to slow down. If you enjoy calming sleep stories like this one, I invite you to subscribe to Whispers of the Night so you never miss the next peaceful journey. Your presence truly means the world here and every night. You are welcome to return to this warm little corner made just for rest, stillness, and slow magic. Before we step deeper into the story, let's prepare your body and mind for rest, a gentle, slow journey inward into softness, into quiet, into peace. Begin by feeling the weight of your body settling exactly where it is. Feel the bed beneath you, the pillow supporting you, the soft blanket resting over you like a warm night breeze. Everything is holding you safely. Take a slow breath in, filling your lungs softly, and let it fall out like a sigh. Let the exhale release the tension you've been carrying. Another breath in, slow and gentle, and out, letting your shoulders melt just a little more. Let your jaw loosen. Let your hands soften. Let your spine relax into the surface beneath you. There's nothing you need to hold right now, nothing to solve, nothing to chase. Imagine a soft light glowing just above your forehead. With every breath, it grows warmer and slowly. It begins to drift downward, gliding over your face, smoothing your thoughts, bringing stillness to your mind. Feel it travel down your neck, unwinding any tightness, loosening every small knot of tension. It flows down your shoulders, warm and gentle, melting away the weight of the day. Now the light drifts down your arms, slow and soft, relaxing your elbows, your wrists, your fingers. Your hands become warm, peaceful, and heavy. With your next slow breath, feel the light wrap around your chest, your heart, your rib cage, letting everything inside you calm and settle. Your breathing becomes deep, even natural, like waves brushing against a quiet shore. The light moves down into your stomach, your lower back, releasing tension you didn't even know you were holding. Let it go, all of it, as your body softens deeper and deeper, relaxing each muscle layer by layer. Your legs grow heavy and warm. Your feet soften, your toes loose, and everything becomes still. Your entire body is now relaxed, open, and calm, resting in this moment, held gently by the quiet of the night. Let your breath slow even more, barely more than a whisper, deep, peaceful, effortless. In this soft, dreamlike space, you are ready to drift into the story's quiet magic. Let the world outside fade completely away as you sink into the stillness and allow your mind to float freely on the gentle river of the night. You are safe, you are held, and you are ready to dream. The clock that stopped time, the silent strike, The town had always seemed to move at its own quiet rhythm, a gentle cadence that lingered even in the busiest of days. Streets were narrow and cobbled, lined with lanterns that flickered softly. In the evening mist, the air carried a peculiar weight, a faint whisper of old stories and hidden corners. And the townspeople had grown accustomed to the soft hush that always seemed to settle over their lives. On ordinary nights, the sound of the distant clock tower striking midnight was a comforting presence, a reminder that the hours continued their endless cycle. But on this night, the familiar sequence broke. It began in a hush, a silence so delicate it could have been mistaken for the wind pausing mid-breath. At the stroke of midnight, the clock tower, ancient and steadfast, fell mute. No chime rang out across the valley. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold itself in anticipation, as if time itself were listening. Then came the faintest tremor. In the air, almost imperceptible at first, but enough to make the dust in the corners of rooms sway like tiny clouds. The town slept, unaware of the unusual quiet. Yet, somewhere in the center of the town, the softest shimmer traced itself along the cobbled stones, catching the eye of the few who stirred in the late hour. By morning, the change was undeniable. The sun rose in a haze of gold and pale amber, spilling across the rooftops in a way that felt slow and deliberate, as if each beam of light had lingered just a fraction longer than usual. The birdsong, too, carried a peculiar rhythm, measured and hesitant, their wings cutting the air in stretches that seemed to stretch on, and the townspeople noticed it. Their own footsteps felt lighter, quieter, and even speech seemed to carry a weightless tone. It was not unpleasant, on the contrary. It was soothing, almost dreamlike, but it was strange, as though the world itself had slowed down without explanation. Those who wandered the streets felt a subtle difference in the air. The town's fountain, which normally bubbled and splashed with lively chatter, now seemed to pause mid-motion, each droplet caught in the sunlight like tiny suspended crystals. Leaves drifted lazily from the trees, and the breeze meandered through narrow lanes as though hesitant, careful not to disturb the unusual calm. One person, stepping lightly over the cobbles, noticed that even their shadow moved differently, elongated and stretching as though reluctant to follow the sun. The sensation was eerie yet mesmerizing, drawing a deep breath from the chest, a breath that felt as though it had taken a little longer to fill and linger, a moment longer before leaving. The town had always had its peculiarities, narrow alleyways that twisted unpredictably, ancient gates hidden between houses, and quiet corners that seemed to hum softly when no one was near. But this was different. Something had shifted in the rhythm of life itself. Windows reflected the sunlight in a slower, dreamlike shimmer, and the soft glow of the morning seemed to linger like honey pooling on the rooftops. Even the shopkeepers felt it, opening their doors with slower movements, arranging their goods with an unusual care, as if every moment had been granted extra time. A hush seemed to settle over the town, a gentle cloak of quiet that made every movement feel deliberate and significant. Among the soft stillness, one observer noticed a strange phenomenon. Tiny silver motes, like dust particles illuminated by morning light, drifted in the air with a curious purpose. They moved in delicate, weaving paths, as if following invisible threads. They hovered, dipped, and spiraled, tracing patterns that no wind could explain, lingering near doorframes, flickering along the edges of rooftops, and sometimes floating across the cobbled streets. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet there was a sense of meaning in their dance. The observer found themselves drawn to these luminous specks, feeling a connection that could not be defined. A whisper at the edge of thought that suggested the town was no longer entirely as it had been. The streets, normally filled with the rhythm of daily life, were subdued. The baker paused mid-step, flour clinging to their hands, while the blacksmith's hammer seemed to hang in the air just before striking. Even the children, normally bursting through the square with uncontainable energy, moved as though wrapped in a slow-motion dream. Each giggle and step softened and elongated. There was no fear in this change, no alarm. It was as if the world had collectively inhaled, holding itself suspended, waiting for something unseen. The town's very heart seemed to beat in this new, gentle rhythm, and those who felt it were aware of it with a sense of awe mingled with slight unease. As the hours passed, it became apparent that the stopping of the clock was not a mere mechanical failure. The effect reached further than the town itself. The river that ran along the edge of the valley, which ordinarily rushed with a cheerful babble, had slowed to a mere whisper, its surface reflecting the morning sky in perfect stillness. Tiny fish beneath the water's surface seemed frozen mid-swim, and the reeds along the bank leaned in ways that suggested the passage of a slower, more deliberate current. Even the wind over the hills carried a softness that suggested a world in suspended animation, a breath held for reasons unknown. The observer walked through the quiet streets, eyes drawn to the clock tower in the center of town. It rose above the rooftops, proud and familiar, its face normally glowing with a faint inner light, but now it was still, the hands frozen at the final stroke of midnight. Something about its silence seemed heavier than mere mechanics could explain. It was as though the clock had become a mirror of the world, reflecting the slow, delicate rhythm that had overtaken everything. The observer reached out instinctively, feeling the vibrations in the air, the subtle hum that seemed to emanate from the tower, faint but persistent, calling to the soul in ways words could not describe. Inside the tower, the air was cool and quiet. Dust motes drifted in the slanting morning light through tall, narrow windows, moving as though aware of the slowed time outside. The gears, normally turning with rhythmic certainty, now hung still, their brass surfaces catching the light and refracting it into golden threads. One could almost hear the faint pulse of time itself, like the echo of a heartbeat, slow and deliberate. It was not mechanical sound that filled the tower, but something softer, a resonance that vibrated through the air and through the skin, whispering of the hidden forces that governed the rhythm of life. The observer climbed the narrow spiral staircase, each step deliberate and mindful, feeling the unusual heaviness of the still air. Reaching the top, they looked out over the town below. From this height, the slowed world was even more apparent. People moved in a gentle, floating rhythm, their gestures stretched into dreamlike sequences. The river reflected the sky in perfect glassiness, and the roofs caught the sunlight in a lingering golden haze. And above it all, the clock face loomed, its hands frozen, its silence profound. The observer felt a shiver of understanding. Time itself had paused, and the town was caught in the delicate balance between the world as it was and the world as it could dream to be. As the day continued, The observer explored the town, noticing subtle details that had never seemed so significant. The garden behind the small chapel was unusually vibrant, each leaf and petal almost suspended in the air, as though caught in a gentle current of invisible energy. In the market square, a stray cat moved with an unusual grace, its movements fluid yet deliberate, pausing mid-step to watch the silver motes drift past. Even the sound of the distant hills seemed softer, muted, yet rich with texture, carrying the suggestion of unseen life, hidden energies, and secrets that had lain dormant until the moment the clock stopped. By evening, the golden light had softened into twilight, and the town was bathed in a gentle glow. The silver motes continued to drift lazily through the air, weaving intricate patterns against the fading light. Lanterns began to glow along the streets, their light unusually warm, almost sentient, illuminating the cobbles in delicate, shifting patterns. The observer wandered toward the edge of the town, where the forest met the fields, and felt the extraordinary quiet all around. It was not oppressive or lonely, but serene, magical, and filled with possibility. Time had paused, but the world was not empty. It was alive in a different, more intimate way. Night fell deep and soft, and the clock tower remained still. The stars appeared in a slow, deliberate emergence, one by one, as if the sky itself were mindful of the new rhythm. The town seemed to hold its collective breath, suspended between the heartbeat of ordinary life and the whisper of a slowed, shimmering world. And somewhere within that quiet, the observer realized that this was not merely a failure of gears or springs. Something had changed, and the pause in time carried meaning, a message, or perhaps an invitation. For the first time, the town's heartbeat seemed to align with the rhythm of dreams, soft, deliberate, and infinitely patient. And so the first day in the suspended world came to an end, leaving the town wrapped in a gentle hush, waiting for the unknown events that the silence of the clock had begun to foretell. The Whispering Workshop. The slowing of the world had left a peculiar quiet over the town, a delicate hush that wrapped itself around every street and alleyway, every rooftop and garden. The observer wandered through these softened streets, with a mixture of wonder and unease, feeling each footstep stretch longer than it should, as though even movement were bending to the strange rhythm of time. It was impossible to tell how long the town had lingered in this state. Minutes and hours seemed to blur, melting into one another, like watercolors bleeding across a page. And yet, curiosity persisted, urging toward the place where answers might hide. The old clockmaker's workshop that had stood on the edge of the square for as long as anyone could remember. The building itself was small, unassuming, its walls gray with age and streaked with the faint green of climbing ivy. The wooden door, scarred with decades of use, gave the impression of being closed against time itself. Yet, when pushed, it yielded with a creak that seemed unusually long, stretching through the air in slow, deliberate notes. Inside, the workshop smelled of wood polish, old brass, and faint smoke from a long-cooled hearth. Shelves lined the walls, crammed with clocks of all shapes and sizes. Some were grand, tall, and proud, their faces shining with intricate craftsmanship, while others were small, delicate, and whimsical, their hands frozen mid-motion or ticking faintly in the subdued light. Each clock seemed to hum quietly, an almost imperceptible resonance that filled the room and reached into the soft stillness outside, vibrating gently against the slow rhythm of the paused town. A figure moved among the clocks, deliberate, precise, and calm. The observer, stepping lightly onto the creaking wooden floor, could feel the subtle difference in the air. Here, time felt thicker, almost tactile, like a liquid pooling in the corners. The clockmaker's hands were steady, but there was a certain gravity in the way he examined each timepiece. Brass cogs and delicate gears were lifted, inspected, and set back down with care. The faint gleam of spectacles caught the light, reflecting gold and silver threads across the room, a soft illumination that seemed more alive than ordinary glass. The observer's presence did not startle the clockmaker, who seemed to sense an energy unusual and rare, one that belonged neither fully to the waking world nor to the dream-strewn silence that had settled over the town. Without turning fully, the clockmaker spoke in a voice soft as wind through the leaves, yet layered with weight and knowledge. You have felt it, haven't you? The change in rhythm, the pause that spreads through every corner of the town, through every heart that beats within it. Time has stopped, not through failure, but through disturbance. The observer, hesitant but compelled, moved closer, letting eyes wander across the clocks that lined the walls. Their faces reflected the strange light in ways that made them seem alive, each tick suspended mid-motion, each pendulum frozen in a subtle arc, yet resonating with some energy that seemed almost conscious. The room was filled with a quiet hum, an underlying vibration that spoke of forces far greater than brass and spring, a delicate balance of moments woven together like threads in an invisible tapestry. This clock, the figure continued, gesturing toward a tall, ornate tower clock that had been the centerpiece of the workshop for decades, is not merely a keeper of hours. It was created to guard something more subtle than minutes and seconds. It holds the rhythm of the waking world, the heartbeat of dreams, the delicate thread between sleep and consciousness. If that thread weakens, time itself begins to stretch, warp, or even falter, and that is what you have witnessed. The observer felt a shiver ripple through the still air, an echo of understanding that was both unsettling and magnificent. Something fragile, powerful, and unseen had been disturbed. Tiny silver motes, like those that had floated along the streets outside, hovered near the open windows, drifting in deliberate paths that almost seemed to follow the movement of the observer. They shimmered faintly against the muted glow of lanterns, tracing patterns that suggested meaning without revealing it, dancing in the air as though waiting for recognition, for the first step toward restoring balance. The clockmaker's hands moved again, adjusting the intricate mechanisms of a small mantle clock. Each motion was precise, almost ritualistic, as if the very act of tending to the timepieces resonated with the energies that now flowed so irregularly through the world. The pause you see is not a failure of craft, the clockmaker explained, but a reflection of something the town has forgotten. Sleep, rest, and the gentle moments of reflection have been neglected. The clocks, as they were made to do, sensed the imbalance, and now the world carries it in every slowed heartbeat, every stretched breath, every lengthened second. Only a rare sensitivity, a presence able to perceive the flow of time's energy, can begin to restore it. The observer listened, breath caught in the slow, thickened air. There was a sense of intimacy in the explanation, a quiet that spoke more through sensation than words. Even the ticking of a small, distant clock felt like a heartbeat, reaching through the stillness, reminding the observer that movement and pause were both alive with meaning. It was as if the air itself, heavy with latent time, pressed gently against every thought and feeling, urging careful attention to what had been forgotten, what needed to be restored. A small drawer in the workbench creaked open, revealing a collection of gears, keys, and fragments of clock hands, some polished, others dulled with age. The clockmaker lifted a tiny cog, turning it in the fingers, and the light seemed to catch upon it in a way that made it glow softly. "Time is not linear here," he said, almost as if reading the observer's thoughts. "It can be felt, manipulated, understood. Each movement, each memory, each moment of calm contributes to the restoration of balance. And now, it has reached a point where the intervention of a living presence is required, a consciousness that can move freely, perceptive enough to sense what the world has forgotten is necessary to awaken the clock once more." The observer's attention drifted to a delicate clock at the far end of the room. Its face was pale, almost luminous, with hands suspended mid-tick. As the observer approached, the silver motes drifted closer, their movement slower here in the workshop, as if waiting for acknowledgement. Reaching out tentatively, the observer could feel a faint warmth, a gentle vibration, almost as if the clock itself were breathing, quietly waiting for someone to understand it. The sensation was mesmerizing and overwhelming, a subtle invitation to step beyond observation and into participation, to take part in the delicate dance that might restore the flow of time. The workshop seemed to stretch and expand in response. Shelves appeared taller, shadows deeper, and the glow from the lanterns warmer, as though the presence of this rare sensitivity influenced the energy of the room itself. The observer realized that the walls, clocks, and motes were connected, each reflecting and amplifying the strange rhythm that had settled over the town. There was no sense of urgency or fear, only a profound, patient insistence that attention, care, and presence were required. It was an invitation to become part of something far greater than the mere measurement of hours and minutes. The clockmaker's voice broke the reverie once more. The tower clock, the one that governs the town, is only part of a larger network, a web of time woven through every corner of this place. When it faltered, it did not do so lightly. The world is suspended between waking and dreaming. Only by offering a living moment, a memory full of warmth, peace, or gratitude can the heart of the clock be rekindled. It is not a matter of mechanics alone. It is an act of presence, a conscious gift that breathes life into the rhythm of the world once more. The observer felt a shiver of anticipation. The concept was both simple and vast, tangible and yet ineffable. A single memory, chosen with care, could echo through the gears, through the brass and crystal, through the suspended seconds and slowing breaths, restoring the heartbeat of time. It was an act that required sensitivity, mindfulness, and trust in the unseen. The silver motes hovered closer, their shimmer reflecting the lantern light in tiny arcs, like scattered fragments of possibility, guiding the way toward the next step in this slow, delicate restoration. Hours passed in a fluid, timeless haze. The observer wandered among the clocks, touching surfaces gently, listening to the faint resonance that vibrated through brass and wood. It was as though each tick and each frozen pause carried a memory of the world before time faltered, a whisper of moments that had been overlooked, of gratitude that had been forgotten. Each careful step, each attentive gesture felt significant in ways that transcended ordinary understanding, as though the observer had been chosen not by accident, but by the subtle pull of the paused universe itself. As the light outside softened into the warm amber of late afternoon, the workshop seemed to glow from within, the clocks reflecting the fading sunlight with golden, molten warmth. The clockmaker, finally resting his hands on the tower clock, nodded slightly, acknowledging that the first step had been taken. The observer felt a quiet resolve bloom within, a sense of purpose threaded with wonder. The pause in time was not a mere disruption. It was an invitation, a gentle call to restore what had been suspended. The observer knew, without needing words to confirm it, that the journey had only just begun. Beyond the walls of the workshop, the town waited, suspended in its soft, dreamlike rhythm. And the path forward would require careful attention, delicate gestures, and the offering of a moment alive with meaning. The silver motes drifted toward the window, spilling out into the streets as the sun sank lower, guiding the observer toward the next step, the next discovery, the next moment that would restore the heartbeat of the town and the clock that had paused to remind the world of its own gentle, fragile rhythm. Night fell over the workshop, deep and slow, with the glow of lanterns painting golden paths across the walls. Outside, the town remained hushed, but the air was charged with subtle anticipation, a sense that the pause, the suspension of time, was not permanent. Somewhere in the stillness, the observer could feel the threads of possibility stretching outward, weaving connections between the workshop, the town, and the heart of the clock itself. And as the night deepened, there was a quiet certainty that the pause was not the end, but a beginning that would guide the observer toward the heart of stillness, and ultimately toward the restoration of time itself. The frozen river. The world outside the workshop had grown quieter still. Time, it seemed, had thickened like honey, flowing sluggishly through the streets and fields of the town. Even the sun, climbing higher in the sky, moved with a measured patience, casting shadows that lingered longer than memory dictated. The town's fountain, the gardens, and the narrow alleys all seemed caught in a gentle spell, a suspended rhythm that made the ordinary extraordinary. Each movement was elongated, each sound softened, as if the world itself had learned to breathe in slow, deliberate beats drawn by the subtle currents of change. The observer wandered toward the river that ran along the edge of the valley. It was usually alive with the restless chatter of water and the glimmer of sunlight dancing upon its ripples. Today, however, the river's surface was unnervingly still, smooth as glass, reflecting the sky in perfect clarity. Trees that leaned toward its banks were mirrored in the water without a single distortion, creating an illusion of a twin world beneath the surface, a world untouched by the usual flow of ours. The usual whispers of reeds and rustling leaves were gone, replaced by a hushed expectancy, as if the river itself were waiting for someone to understand its frozen secret. The observer stepped closer to the edge. The air here carried a subtle vibration, a hum that tickled the skin and echoed faintly in the chest. Tiny silver motes, familiar from the streets and the workshop, floated lazily above the water, catching sunlight in glimmers that danced across the observer's vision. Each mote seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the world, faint yet insistent, as though reminding that time had paused for a reason, and that every moment held significance. Reaching out toward the water, the observer noticed a startling truth. While the river and the town moved slowly, every step taken personally seemed unhindered. Each motion flowed naturally, almost weightlessly, as though the suspension of time affected everything except those able to perceive its hidden rhythm. It was a peculiar and exhilarating sensation, the freedom to move in a world where everything else obeyed a slower cadence. A sense of possibility unfurled, gentle and insistent, suggesting that perhaps it was not only observation that mattered, but presence, deliberate and conscious, that could influence the very flow of the suspended world. Tiny droplets hung suspended midair from the reeds, catching and refracting light in miniature prisms. Fallen leaves hovered gently above the surface, as though caught in invisible currents, waiting for someone to decide whether they should drift, fall, or rise. Fish swam just beneath the water, their movements suspended mid-swim, frozen in a way that was almost mesmerizing. A tableau of life paused in time, and beneath all of it, the observer sensed threads of unseen energy, delicate currents weaving between riverbank and town, connecting everything in an intricate, invisible lattice that pulsed with the slow heartbeat of a paused world, drawn along the riverbank by these faint threads. The observer noticed a path of silver motes leading away from the town's edge and toward a dense forest that bordered the valley. The motes moved with a purpose, hovering in arcs and spirals, tracing invisible patterns that seemed to whisper of hidden places. With each step, the world's pause deepened, the air growing thicker, the sunlight lingering longer in the spaces between leaves. Even the scent of the river seemed to hang more densely, rich with the smell of moss, water, and earth, amplified by the stillness. Every sensation was sharper, more meaningful, as if time's slowing had stripped the ordinary of distraction and left only the essence of perception. The observer followed the motes along the riverbank, noticing more subtle changes as the town's magic continued to unfold. Trees swayed slightly even though the wind was still there, branches bending as though moving to a rhythm only they could hear. Ripples on the water appeared intermittently, tiny and deliberate, forming patterns that vanished before the eye could fully grasp them. Birds perched in the canopy above, their movements measured and deliberate, wings half-raised in a slow-motion ballet. It was as though the entire ecosystem had synchronized to a hidden pulse, one that had been revealed only because the clock had stopped, and only the observant could sense it. A slight incline led the observer to a natural clearing along the river's bend, where the light caught the water at a perfect angle, scattering it into ribbons of gold and silver. Here, the river's frozen surface reflected the sky with uncanny clarity, and the silver motes clustered in a subtle, deliberate formation, as if forming a map of some unseen pattern. Each mote twitched faintly in the air, responding to presence and attention, creating a gentle, hypnotic dance. It was impossible to look away, for the arrangement felt alive, purposeful, a language older than memory, offering guidance in the stillness. Moving closer to the water, the observer felt a tingling sensation along the skin, a subtle acknowledgement from the river itself. There was intelligence in the suspended flow, a quiet consciousness that seemed aware of the observer's presence. It was as if the river had paused, not an accident, but an invitation, allowing a moment of communion with the one who could perceive the hidden pulse. Tiny ripples formed in concentric patterns at the water's edge, responding only to motion, yet vanishing instantly, as if testing, assessing, waiting. The river was no longer simply water. It had become a threshold, a mirror, reflecting not only the paused world, but the observer's own ability to influence it. As the observer stepped carefully along the bank, the sense of purpose intensified. The silver motes floated closer, brushing past fingertips with delicate warmth, and the water beneath mirrored not only the sky, but the subtle movements of thought and attention. The slowed world was teaching a new language, one of observation, intention, and presence. Time, though suspended, was not gone. It had shifted into another form, waiting for interaction to resume its natural flow. Every step, every glance, every breath became part of a silent conversation with the river, the forest, and the suspended town. Eventually, the path led to a small, ancient bridge spanning the river, its wooden planks worn smooth by countless years of use. Normally, the bridge would have felt ordinary, even mundane, but in this suspended world it seemed monumental, a threshold between the known and the unseen. Each step onto the bridge sent faint ripples across the river's mirrored surface, responding delicately to presence. The silver motes hovered along the railing, forming delicate arcs and spirals, guiding the observer across as if leading to something hidden just beyond perception. The observer felt the river's quiet power beneath them. The water reflected not only the sky and the banks, but also subtle pulses of light, tiny threads of energy that hinted at the deeper forces at play. A sense of anticipation grew, a gentle insistence that something important awaited beyond this frozen expanse, something connected to the pause in time and the suspended heartbeat of the town. The observer understood instinctively that the bridge was not just a crossing, but a passage, a step toward understanding the delicate weave of time itself. At the far side of the bridge, the silver motes began to cluster into a faint, luminous trail, spiraling upward toward the edge of the forest. Their movement was deliberate, slow, and mesmerizing, guiding attention with subtle authority. The river, though still, seemed to follow their motion, faint ripples appearing and disappearing in response to the light. The forest beyond beckoned, dark and rich, alive with possibilities hidden in the pause. Every step into the shadowed trees felt weighted with significance, the forest floor soft and strange, almost as if it had been waiting for the observer all along. The slowing of the river had revealed more than suspended water. It had unveiled a path through time, a delicate interweaving of energy, attention, and presence. The silver motes continued to guide, moving gracefully toward the heart of the forest, while the observer followed, sensing the rhythm of a world paused but not dormant. Every movement, every choice, every inhaled breath seemed to echo through the thickened air, part of a larger narrative written in moments stretched like golden threads. Night began to settle gently over the river, the sky shifting from amber to indigo, sprinkled with stars that twinkled faintly through the canopy. The river reflected their light, doubled and perfect, and the silver motes shimmered like fragments of starlight hovering above the surface. The observer paused at the edge, looking back toward the bridge and the suspended town, feeling the weight and beauty of the frozen world. Time, though slowed, was alive, waiting for the next careful step, the next moment of understanding, the next gesture that would restore the rhythm of everything it touched. With a deep breath, the observer stepped fully into the forest, leaving the frozen river behind, yet carrying its memory in every sense. The river's pause had revealed a hidden truth, that even in stillness, life and time continued to flow in subtle, unseen ways, guided by attention, presence, and care. The journey toward the heart of the paused world had only just begun, and the observer moved forward, guided by silver motes, gentle pulses, and the quiet insistence of a world waiting to awaken. The heart of stillness. The forest grew dense and quiet as the observer moved deeper, every step deliberate, careful not to disturb the hushed rhythm that hung in the air like a soft veil. The trees towered overhead, their branches woven together in intricate patterns, filtering the sunlight into gentle streaks that danced slowly across the forest floor. Shadows and light intertwined in the pause of time, creating shapes that seemed almost alive, bending and stretching with a subtle intelligence. Tiny silver motes continued to float ahead, weaving delicate trails that guided the observer along a winding path, each step carrying a sense of purpose and discovery. The air here was thicker, tinged with the scent of moss, damp earth, and something faintly metallic like old brass. Every inhalation seemed to carry more than oxygen. It carried resonance, a subtle vibration that reached the chest and settled deep in the bones. It was a forest suspended between worlds, neither fully of the waking day nor entirely of the dream that lingered in the paused town. The observer felt an acute awareness of the stillness, a sense that every sound, every movement, even every heartbeat was magnified in importance. Each step was an act of observation, a conversation with the unseen pulse that flowed through the suspended world, following the silver motes. The path led to a natural clearing where the light coalesced into a soft, golden glow. In the center of the clearing floated an object that drew the eye immediately, a crystalline structure of pure light, suspended in midair. It pulsed faintly, irregularly, like a heartbeat struggling against some unseen weight. The heart of the clock. Its glow was gentle, yet insistent, casting reflections onto the surrounding trees, painting the forest floor with moving patterns of color and warmth. The observer approached with reverence, aware that this fragile core was the source of the paused rhythm that had stretched through the town, the river, and the streets. Reaching out tentatively, the observer could feel the faint vibration in the air, subtle but insistent. The crystal's light responded to presence, flickering and pulsing as though acknowledging the touch. The forest seemed to lean inward, shadows bending gently, leaves shifting with the soft current of unseen energy. The silver motes circled around, tracing arcs and spirals that seemed to communicate something unspoken, a silent guide toward understanding the fragile heart of time itself. As the observer lingered near the crystal, the world shifted slightly, becoming dreamlike in a new way. Floating images appeared, translucent and delicate, like lanterns of memory drifting through the air. Each image was a moment, captured and suspended in the pulsing light, the quiet turning of a page. Laughter shared under a gentle sun, the warmth of a hand held in comfort. It was a place where memories and time intertwined, where the very essence of life's moments could be seen and touched. The heart of the clock was not merely a machine. It was a repository of lived experience, fragile and luminous, waiting for restoration. From the periphery emerged a gentle presence, a figure wreathed in light and shadow, ethereal and fluid. It moved with the same deliberate slowness that had overtaken the town, its gestures graceful, almost ceremonial. This was the guardian of the moments, a being born of the same rhythm that had paused the town, a custodian of the delicate balance between dream and waking. Its voice, when it spoke, was soft as the rustle of leaves, yet carried resonance that reached deep within, vibrating with the pulse of the crystal. The clock has stopped, the presence whispered, not because of neglect alone, but because the world has forgotten the quiet, the pause, the weight of simple presence. Time does not flow in haste here. It flows in attention, in care, in the recognition of what is truly alive. The observer listened, mesmerized, feeling the significance of each word. There was no judgment, only observation, understanding, and the quiet insistence that the world could be restored through deliberate attention. Every movement of the guardian, every pulse of light from the crystal, seemed to reinforce a hidden truth, that time, though paused, had not vanished. It had only shifted, waiting for the conscious act that would return its rhythm. The forest, the river, the town hall were suspended, yet connected. Awaiting participation, the crystal pulsed faintly in response to the observer's gaze. It was delicate, fragile, but unmistakably alive. Each beat was irregular, a signal that it was incomplete, struggling against the absence of something essential. The observer understood intuitively. The heart of the clock required a living moment, a memory imbued with care, warmth, or gratitude, to restore its light and set the world flowing once more. It was not a task of force or mechanics, but of presence, intention, and awareness. Stepping closer, the observer felt the subtle pull of the suspended memories around them. Lantern-like visions floated in delicate arcs, drifting lazily through the air, reflecting the light of the crystal. Each memory was a fragment, a moment chosen by life itself, waiting to be recognized and offered back. The guardian moved among them, guiding with gestures to slow and subtle, to fully perceive, yet unmistakable in their effect. The observer's role became clear: to choose a memory, a living moment that could breathe life back into the suspended core, restoring the flow of time. The forest around them responded. Leaves swayed gently without wind, and the soft glow of the crystal illuminated intricate patterns of moss and bark. Shadows stretched and contracted with a slow, deliberate pulse, and the silver motes clustered near the chosen area, shimmering in anticipation. The world, though paused, seemed to lean forward, attentive, waiting for the offering that would rekindle the heart of the clock. It was an intimate, almost sacred space, one where the smallest gesture could ripple outward with immense consequence. The observer took a moment to inhale deeply, feeling the dense, vibrating air fill the lungs. The heartbeat of the crystal echoed faintly within, subtle but perceptible, a reminder that the world could continue if the right act was offered. Silver motes swirled around the hands, the face of the crystal, and the floating memories, tracing arcs and spirals as if mapping the invisible currents of attention and intention. The forest and the heart of the clock seemed to watch with silent expectation, a delicate communion of energy that spanned the natural and the magical dot. Then came the selection. Among the drifting memories, one glimmered softly, warmer and more inviting than the others. It was a simple moment, unremarkable in ordinary life, yet saturated with meaning. A quiet evening, a sense of safety, a feeling of being seen and held. It radiated calm and gratitude, the kind of peace that lingered even in the smallest gestures. The observer reached toward it, offering that living moment to the crystal's pulsing heart. And as it touched the surface, the light responded. The crystal brightened, a slow, soft glow spreading through its core, radiating outward in delicate ripples that seemed to touch the forest itself. The guardian's form shimmered with approval, a subtle acknowledgement of the act, and the silver motes danced more vigorously, weaving around the crystal in intricate patterns of light. The heartbeat of the clock became steadier, more confident, resonating outward in waves that traveled along the threads of suspended time. The forest seemed to exhale, a soft rustle of leaves carrying a sense of relief and renewal. The observer felt a profound sense of calm, a quiet understanding that even in stillness, presence and attention held the power to restore life and rhythm to the world. As the light from the crystal spread, it illuminated hidden details of the clearing moss, glistening with subtle luminescence, tree bark etched with patterns that had gone unnoticed, tiny flowers that had remained closed in the pause. The silver motes moved in deliberate arcs, guiding attention to the subtle wonders, celebrating the renewed pulse of time. Every breath, every glance, every step became part of a symphony that had been suspended. Now, gradually resuming its melody, the observer lingered, watching the heartbeat of the crystal synchronize with the world beyond the clearing. The river, the town, the streets, and even the workshop felt the subtle influence, as if distant threads of light and rhythm were connecting the heart of stillness to every suspended corner. The guardian's presence softened, shimmering and dissipating gradually, leaving behind the quiet assurance that the act had succeeded, that the world's pulse was returning, delicate but certain. Night approached, though it carried a new weight, a sense of calm resolution, a gentle flow that suggested continuity rather than suspension. The heart of the clock, restored by a single living moment, pulsed steadily, its light now warm and constant, weaving threads of restored rhythm through the forest and the world beyond. The observer, filled with a quiet awe, understood that the journey was far from over. But the first vital act of restoration had been completed. The pause, the silence, and the stillness had revealed the delicate power of attention, presence, and memory, and the world, once suspended, now moved toward life once more. With careful steps, the observer turned from the clearing, following the silver motes back along the forest path toward the river, the town, and the workshop. Each step was deliberate, infused with the knowledge that the simplest gestures carried extraordinary consequence, that time itself could be nurtured, healed, and restored through intention. The forest seemed to watch and guide, every leaf and shadow alive with quiet acknowledgement of the act. As the heart of stillness continued to pulse, steady and luminous, in harmony with the world it had paused to protect. The moment that matters. The world beyond the clearing hummed with a subtle energy, a quiet rhythm that hinted at renewal. The heartbeat of the crystal still pulsed gently, sending ripples of light through the forest, across the river, and back into the streets of the suspended town. Yet, the observer understood that while the heart had been rekindled, the restoration was not yet complete. The crystal's core needed more than acknowledgement. It required the essence of life itself, a living moment infused with warmth, gratitude, or peace, to flow through it fully and awaken the rhythm of the world. The forest around seemed to guide the search. Every step along the soft moss and winding paths felt deliberate, the silver motes hovering nearby as if urging careful attention. Shadows shifted with purpose, revealing fleeting glimpses of hidden wonders, delicate ferns unfurling midair, small blossoms opening as though aware of presence, and streams of light gliding slowly through the canopy, catching the floating motes in arcs of silver and gold. Time was still suspended, yet every motion, every glance, every breath felt alive, loaded with potential. The observer realized that the offering of a single, living moment would ripple outward, touching the town, the river, and even the workshop where the first whispers of understanding had begun. A gentle warmth began to grow within the observer's chest, an intuitive guidance that suggested looking inward, beyond the forest and the crystal, beyond even the tangible presence of the silver motes. Memories floated in the air like lanterns, delicate and weightless, drifting in arcs that seemed responsive to thought and attention. They shimmered with faint light, glimpses of days and nights remembered, fragments of emotions and sensations that had long been tucked away in the folds of time. Each memory carried a resonance, a subtle vibration that harmonized with the pulse of the crystal. Yet only one would be sufficient. Only one would carry the quiet weight of restoration. Among the drifting lanterns, a memory began to glow more warmly, brighter than the others. It was simple, ordinary at first glance. A quiet evening beneath a sky brushed with soft twilight. A gentle warmth spreading from the presence of someone cherished. Hands clasped in comfort, eyes meeting in quiet understanding. There was no grand spectacle, no dramatic gesture, only the serene intimacy of shared peace. And yet, in its simplicity, it radiated strength, the kind of calm that rooted itself deeply within the soul, the kind of gratitude that lingered even when unspoken. The observer felt a pull, a delicate insistence, that this moment alone held the essence necessary to awaken the heart fully, reaching toward the floating memory. The observer felt the subtle vibrations of the crystal responding, pulsing faster, brighter, but still fragile. The forest leaned closer, shadows bending gently, and the silver motes circled in anticipation. Each motion was amplified, each breath weighted with significance, and the observer realized that this act was not simply a gift to the crystal, it was an offering to the suspended world itself. The moment had to be present, alive with intention, infused with awareness and care. Without hesitation, the memory was offered, a living fragment of quiet, tender existence sent into the luminous core of the heart. Light erupted softly from the crystal, not harsh or blinding, but warm and radiant, spreading outward in delicate ripples that caressed the forest floor, the trees, and the river beyond. The silver motes moved with renewed energy, weaving intricate patterns that glimmered like threads of starlight. The pulse of the crystal stabilized, a slow, confident heartbeat, harmonizing with the subtle rhythms of the forest and the world beyond. The observer felt the gentle tug of connection, a sense that the moment offered had become part of a larger weave, linking every suspended second in a chain of restored life. The forest seemed to breathe in response, leaves rustling softly, branches swaying in slow, deliberate arcs. Tiny creatures, previously frozen mid-motion, began to move again, cautiously at first, as though testing the rhythm of renewed time. A bird lifted its wings, stretching them in deliberate motion, then took flight in slow, graceful arcs. The river shimmered, faint ripples forming and dispersing as the waters began to flow again, carrying light and reflection downstream. The town beyond, though still partially suspended, now showed hints of subtle motion, a flicker of shadow here, a glint of movement there, as if awakening from a prolonged reverie. The observer paused, feeling the warmth of the memory spreading, the gentle satisfaction of a world regaining its rhythm. Each silver mote shimmered with acknowledgement, tracing arcs that connected the crystal, the forest, the river, and the town. It was a delicate dance of cause and effect, of presence and intention, an intricate orchestration of energy that only became visible in the suspended pause of time. The forest itself seemed alive with understanding, every leaf, every branch, every hidden blossom vibrating with quiet joy in the clearing. The crystal pulsed with a soft, steady light, no longer flickering or dim. The guardian's form, previously ethereal and fluid, shimmered into existence again, luminous and serene. It moved through the clearing with deliberate grace, acknowledging the act without words, radiating calm approval. The pulse of the crystal aligned with the pulse of the observer, harmonizing with the threads of suspended energy that connected the forest, the river, and the town. There was a profound sense of balance restored, a quiet understanding that the smallest, simplest gesture of care could ripple across the world in ways both subtle and magnificent. The observer looked outward, across the forest, the bridge, and the river beyond. The world seemed to hum faintly, a rhythm that had returned but remained delicate, fragile in its infancy. Every element, the trees, the water, the streets, the sky vibrated with renewed life, aware of the gift that had been given. The silver motes lingered in arcs of gentle luminescence, hovering near the crystal, near the observer, and over the river, acknowledging that the moment had carried the weight and purity necessary to set the world back into motion. Time did not rush back, nor did the world resume its old rhythm instantly. Instead, the restoration was careful, deliberate, like the unfolding of a delicate flower. Moments stretched and returned to flow in harmony, seconds aligning naturally with minutes, and hours gradually regaining their familiar cadence. It was not sudden, not jarring, but gentle, a soft return to the pulse of life, guided by intention and awareness, sustained by the quiet power of a single living moment. The observer remained in the clearing for a while, watching as the pulse of the crystal extended beyond the forest, touching distant streets and rooftops. The river now carried reflection and movement in equal measure. Leaves floated gently on the water once more, and the bridge over the river reflected a world gradually regaining its natural rhythm. The towns, streets, previously suspended, now hummed with the quiet pulse of restored time, footsteps echoing softly in the cobbled alleys, voices gentle and warm. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible change, yet profoundly powerful. A world healed not through force, but through intention, presence, and the careful offering of a single, meaningful moment. As night approached, the observer finally turned from the clearing, moving back toward the bridge, the river, and the town beyond. The silver motes lingered, guiding each step, shimmering with acknowledgement and quiet gratitude. The forest, too, seemed to lean in, farewell, leaves brushing softly against one another, shadows stretching and relaxing with a gentle sigh. The pulse of the crystal continued steadily, its light soft yet unwavering, a beacon of balance and restored rhythm in the heart of the paused world. By the time the observer reached the riverbank, the subtle magic of restoration had reached farther than the forest clearing. The water flowed with renewed clarity, reflecting the first stars of night that now twinkled in harmony with the pulse of the crystal. Lanterns along the streets glimmered faintly, responding to the restored rhythm, and the town exhaled softly in quiet acknowledgement. The moment had worked. A single act of care, a quiet memory offered with full awareness, had rekindled the heartbeat of the world. Time, fragile and delicate, was alive again, moving gently, flowing naturally, and carrying within it the lessons of stillness, presence, and the quiet weight of meaning. The observer lingered for a final moment, feeling the warmth of the living memory spread outward, connecting every element of the town, the river, and the forest in a delicate network of restored time. There was satisfaction.com and a quiet joy in knowing that even a single, ordinary moment could wield extraordinary power when offered with intention. The silver motes swirled gently one last time, hovering around the observer, the crystal, and the river, acknowledging the act that had mended the pause and reaffirmed the delicate rhythm that bound the world together. Night settled fully over the valley, calm and luminous, the stars reflecting the restored pulse of time. The observer turned toward the town, carrying the quiet glow of accomplishment, the awareness that one simple living moment had transformed the suspended world. Time had returned, gentle and steady, yet it would forever carry within it the subtle memory of stillness, of attention, and of the small, extraordinary act that had set everything flowing once more. Time begins again. The path back toward the town felt different now, as though the ground itself recognized the shift that had taken place. The air was gentler, warmer, holding the faint hum of returning rhythm. Each footstep carried a subtle resonance, a quiet echo that hadn't been present before, as though time was beginning to breathe again slowly, cautiously, like someone awakening after a long, heavy sleep. The silver motes drifted around the traveler in loose, lazy spirals, no longer frantic or flickering, but moving with a soft certainty, guiding the way through the forest that had sheltered the suspended world. The trees leaned overhead like guardians, their branches stretching in slow arcs, leaves brushing one another with a whisper that resembled a sigh of relief. The suspended silence that had dominated the woods had softened. Now there was a faint rustle, a delicate murmur, sudden nothing, fast, but the early hints of natural motion returning to its rightful place. Even the shadows swayed with more intention, moving gently along the moss-covered ground as the traveler reached the edge of the forest. The crystalline heartbeat behind them pulsed once more, steady and warm. The light it emitted flowed outward in thin strands, weaving through the trees and spreading across the valley. It was not a blinding brilliance, but a soft luminescence, like starlight stretched thin through glass. It reached the riverbank first, rippling across the surface of the water. The river, once frozen mid-flow, shivered. A single ripple formed, delicate as a sigh. Then another, and slowly the water resumed its movement. The current flowed with deliberate grace, carrying fallen leaves along its surface in quiet arcs. The reflection of the first stars shimmered with life again, bending and stretching with the river's gentle motion. Time had not fully settled, but it was returning piece by piece, like threads being drawn back into a tapestry that had briefly unraveled. Crossing the bridge felt like walking through a space between worlds, one still tinged with lingering stillness, the other awakening with cautious hope. The wooden planks beneath the traveler's feet groaned softly, as though rediscovering the sound of their own movement. Lanterns along the bridge flickered faintly, their lights dancing with the rhythm of restored time. They cast shimmering patterns on the railing, golden ripples shifting in tandem with the river below. The town beyond looked familiar, yet transformed. Streets that once held a suspended hush now carried hints of warmth. A curtain swayed gently in a window, stirred by a breeze that hadn't been felt for what seemed like an eternity. A distant sign creaked softly, a sound so natural that it felt like a greeting, an acknowledgement that the world's pulse had begun to settle again. The traveler took a slow breath, feeling the cool night air fill their lungs. It tasted different, now lighter, almost sweet. The rooftops glimmered in the soft moonlight, and the cobblestone roads beneath their feet felt grounded, real, alive. Though the world had not yet returned to its full rhythm, it was moving toward, drawn by the restored heartbeat of the crystal deep within the forest. The old workshop came into view as the traveler walked through the quiet street. Its warm glow seeped through the small front windows, casting gentle golden patterns on the stone path. The door creaked open slowly, as though it had been waiting. Inside, the familiar warmth of the place wrapped around the traveler like a blanket, the faint smell of oil and metal, the delicate ticking of smaller clocks that lined the shelves, and the soft, steady heartbeat of something gently awakening. The clockmaker stood near the center of the room, hands folded, head bowed in quiet contemplation. The traveler didn't need words to understand the expression that lifted his eyes: gratitude, relief, and something deeper, unspoken acknowledgement of the effort that had rippled through the forest and into the heart of the suspended town. The great tower clock, visible through the workshop's back window, stood tall against the night sky. Its face, once dim and silent, now glowed faintly with renewed energy. The hands trembled slightly, as though remembering how to move, and then, with a soft, resonant sound that echoed deep into the night, the clock chimed once. The chime spread like rings across a pond. A gentle wave of warm, golden light radiated outward, sweeping across rooftops and drifting over the town square. It carried no force, no sharpness only, a soothing resonance that settled softly into every corner, every shadow, every quiet space. Each building seemed to respond, exhaling with the release of tension. The sound reached the river, where the water shimmered in greeting. It drifted along the forest canopy, reflecting in the silver motes still floating overhead. The world stirred. A cat stretched on a doorstep, blinking awake as though from a dream. A wind chime made the faintest murmur, touched by the first true breeze since the pause. Even the stars overhead seemed to shine a little brighter, as though recognizing that time had returned to its natural order. The traveler stepped outside again, drawn by the soft glow spreading through the town. The gentle hum of life was returning, not all at once, but in careful, measured pulses. A lantern flickered more brightly. A distant clock began ticking again. The river whispered more freely. Windows along the street glowed with renewed warmth as lights flickered back into rhythmic dance. It was as though the entire town had been holding its breath and was finally exhaling in relief. Walking further along the cobblestone path, the traveler felt the subtle pull of connection between everything: the clock, the woods, the river, the suspended moment offered deep in the crystal's core. The silver motes hovered close, drifting in slow spirals, their soft glow reflecting the gentle pulse of the world around them. They gathered in small clusters near the traveler, almost as if offering thanks before drifting into the night air and dispersing into the rhythm of returning time. The sky overhead shifted gently. Clouds parted, revealing a wide expanse of midnight blue. The moon hung low, tinted with a soft golden glow, as though touched by the crystal's restored light. The stars shimmered, each one seeming to pulse in harmony with the heartbeat, returning to the world below. As the traveler wandered through the town square, they noticed the fountain at the center, its water finally flowing again, catching the moonlight as it splashed in gentle arcs. The sound of it was delicate, hypnotic, like the quiet laughter of a memory rediscovered. People would return to these streets soon enough, unaware of just how close their world had come to drifting beyond the reach of time. But some part of them would feel different, more attuned, more present, subtly aware that something had shifted in the quiet hours of the night. The traveler reached the edge of the town, where the path sloped upward. Climbing it slowly, they felt the breeze growing cooler, carrying whispers of the forest and the distant pulse of the crystal. When they reached the top, they turned to look back at the town below. It was peaceful, quiet, but alive, glowing gently beneath the night sky. The lanterns shimmered in warm, golden tones. Streets traced soft patterns of returning motion, and the tower clock shone with renewed purpose, its face a beacon of balance restored. The traveler stood there for a long moment, watching as the world found its rhythm again, allowing the scene to settle deeply within their heart. A sense of calm washed over them, calm and quiet fulfillment. Not pride, not triumph, but something more tender, the gentle understanding that even the smallest act of care could shape the world in ways unseen. The memory offered deep in the crystal's core had become part of the returning flow of time, its warmth woven into every tick, every ripple, every breath of the restored world. The night deepened. A soft breeze stirred the traveler's hair. The silver motes, now fewer and more transparent, danced across the hilltop before fading gently into the darkness, their purpose fulfilled. The traveler closed their eyes for a moment, listening to the soft ticking of the world around them, feeling the pulse of time spreading through the valley. Then, with a quiet breath and a peaceful heart, they turned from the hilltop and began the gentle walk home. Their steps were unhurried, in harmony with the calm, steady rhythm that now flowed through the town, the forest, and the river. The world was awake again. Time was alive, and in the soft glow of moonlight, under stars that shimmered like fragments of the restored crystal, every moment carried the gentle promise of balance, peace, and the quiet magic of beginning again. Thank you for spending this peaceful night with Whispers of the Night. May the calm you found here stay with you, wrapping your dreams in warmth and quiet magic. If this journey brought you peace, remember to subscribe so you can return to this soft space whenever you need rest, stillness, or gentle escape. Sleep deeply now, and may the night carry you into the sweetest dreams. Good night.